My parents told me I'm not their son, and if I want to stay, I have to pay. Turning 18 was supposed to feel like a big deal, a step into adulthood, freedom, and all that nonsense people talk about. But for me, it was just another year of feeling like I didn't belong. I had known it since childhood. Something about me was different, and it wasn't just in the way I felt, but in the way I looked. My parents, well, the people I thought were my parents, had brown eyes. My younger sister, Emily, had brown eyes. My aunts, uncles, grandparents, same thing. Meanwhile, I was stuck with these piercing blue eyes that people always said were striking, but felt more like a spotlight pointing out how I didn't fit in. And then there was the birthmark on my neck. Small, oddly shaped, and unfortunately resembling the Apple logo. Yeah, the tech company. Kids in school had a field day with that one. Hey, Apple boy, how much does Steve Jobs pay for branding? Funny, real funny. But none of that mattered as much as the reality I live with every day. Emily was a golden child, and I was, well, just there. She got love, attention, gifts, everything a kid could want. Me, the only thing I got was responsibility. I had been working since I was old enough to hold a part-time job, paying for things my parents should have been covering, helping with rent, groceries, whatever they needed. They made it clear there wasn't enough money for anything extra. No college fund. No gifts. No exceptions. I should have been used to it, but nothing prepared me for the night of Emily's 16th birthday. I had been at work, pulling a late shift because, well, someone had to pay the bills. That morning, my parents had told me they'd be going out to have a quiet dinner with her. No big party, just a small celebration. So when I finally got home, exhausted and reeking of fryer grease, I wasn't expecting what I saw. The driveway was packed with cars. Music blasted from inside the house. And right there, parked front and center, was a brand new car with a giant red bow. My stomach dropped. I walked in to find a full-blown party. Still going. A few of Emily's friends glanced at me before going right back to celebrating. Like I wasn't even there. I spotted Emily in the center of it all, glowing with excitement. I had saved up to buy her something small, nothing crazy, just a necklace I thought she'd like. I walked over, handed it to her, and waited. She took one look at it, scoffed, and tossed it onto the couch like it was a piece of trash. I turned away before she could see how much that stung. In the kitchen, my parents were laughing with some of their friends, acting like this was the best night of their lives. I asked why they hadn't told me about the party. If I had known, I might have found a way to switch shifts. They shrugged it off, saying it was last minute, spontaneous. A lie. They hadn't wanted me there. Then I asked about the car. They hesitated, avoiding my gaze. I reminded them how, when I had begged for help with college, they told me they had no money, but a car for Emily? That was fine. My dad fumbled for words, tried to make excuses, but my mom cut him off. Just tell him, she said. Her voice was sharp, cold. Tell me what? Dad sighed, rubbing his face like this was more exhausting for him than for me. Then he said the words that would change my life forever. I wasn't their real son. They had adopted me when they thought they couldn't have kids. Then, by some miracle, Emily came along. And suddenly, I was no longer a gift. I was a burden, a responsibility they never really wanted in the first place. My head spun. The room blurred. The weight of everything I had ever felt, the favoritism, the neglect, the lack of love, crashed down on me all at once. It all made sense now. Then Dad said something even worse. I could either keep helping with the bills, pulling my weight like I always had, or I could leave, right then and there. I didn't hesitate. I turned on my heel, walked upstairs, and started throwing my things into a bag. No dramatic speeches, no pleading for answers. I was done. They had made it clear where I stood in their lives, and I wasn't going to stick around waiting for another scrap of affection. I grabbed my bag, walked out the front door, and didn't look back, because there was nothing left for me in that house. The night I left, I walked for miles. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no backup, just a bag of clothes and a phone with barely any charge left. The streets were quiet, just the occasional car passing by, headlights sweeping over me like I didn't exist. I found the cheapest motel I could. One of those places that probably hadn't been deep cleaned since the 90s. The neon sign flickered, buzzing like it was barely clinging to life. Just like me, the guy at the front desk barely looked up from his tiny TV, muttering something about cash only. I handed over what little I had, got a key, and stepped into a room that smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener. The bed was lumpy. The carpet had stains I didn't want to investigate, and the bathroom faucet made a noise like it was possessed. But it was a roof over my head. That was more than I had an hour ago. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, and tried to process everything. My so-called parents had thrown me out like yesterday's trash. No goodbye. No remorse. Not even a second thought. Even stray dogs got treated better than that. A part of me kept waiting for a text. A call. Something. But the only thing my phone showed was the low battery icon. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. I could sit here and feel sorry for myself, or I could do something about it. If they thought I was just going to disappear, they were wrong. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. I was going to prove to them, to the world, but most of all, to myself, that I was worth something, that I could make it on my own. For now, though I needed sleep, tomorrow my new life would start. Morning came with a dull headache and the realization that I had no idea what to do next. The motel had one of those sad continental breakfasts, stale bagels, questionable coffee, and a cereal dispenser that looked like it hadn't been refilled since the Clinton administration. I grabbed a cup of the coffee, took one sip, and immediately regretted it. If this was what adulthood tasted like, I wanted a refund, but I had bigger problems. I couldn't afford another night here, and I needed a job fast. I spent the day going from place to place, filling out applications, sitting through interviews that all ended the same way. We're looking for someone with experience. Experience. Right. Because everyone's born knowing how to do a job. By late afternoon, I was exhausted, frustrated, and running low on options. That's when I saw it. A big auto repair shop, part of a well-known chain. I had always been into cars, fascinated by how they worked, the way everything fit together. I figured, why not? The manager was an older guy with oil-stained hands and a look that said he'd seen it all. He skimmed my application, then glanced at me. You ever worked in a shop before? I shook my head, expecting the usual rejection. Instead, he just shrugged. You willing to learn? I nodded so fast I probably looked ridiculous. And just like that, I had a job. At first, I was just an extra set of hands, sweeping floors, fetching tools, doing the stuff no one else wanted to do. My first few days, I was pretty sure I had rookie written on my forehead. I tripped over toolboxes, got oil on my only pair of decent jeans, and once almost blinded myself with brake cleaner. But I watched everything. I paid attention. When one of the mechanics needed help, I jumped in. Some things came naturally, others not so much. But the guys at the shop were patient. They'd been in my shoes once, too. Slowly, I got better. I learned the difference between a socket wrench and a torque wrench. Figure out that lefty-loosey, righty-tighty was actually solid life advice. I even stopped accidentally burning my fingers on hot engine parts. Mostly, days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And after a year, I wasn't just an assistant anymore. I was a full-fledged mechanic with a decent paycheck, enough to move into a better apartment, eat something other than fast food, and finally feel like I had some stability. But stability wasn't the same as success. Most people would have been happy just having a steady job, a routine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stuck, that I was meant for more. I started reading at night. Books about success, self-improvement, finance. Stuff I never would have cared about before. I read about people who had nothing and built themselves up, about how your mindset shapes your reality, about how success wasn't just about luck, it was about action. And the more I read, the more I believed it. I wasn't going to spend my whole life fixing cars in someone else's shop. I didn't know what my next step was yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't done yet. Work had become routine. Get up, head to the shop, fix cars, grab some cheap dinner, go home, read a book, sleep, rinse and repeat. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't the life I wanted forever. Something inside me still itched for more. I just didn't know what more looked like yet. That day had been particularly rough. A full schedule of oil changes turned into a nightmare when a guy brought in a truck that looked like it had been through a demolition derby. The boss threw it at me and said, "Make it run." That was it. No instructions. No manual. Just me, a beat-up truck, and about 6 hours of trial and error. By the time I clocked out, I was exhausted, starving, and smelling like motor oil. I swung by a grocery store on my way home. One of those 24-hour places with the flickering fluorescent lights that made everything look depressing. I just needed something quick, microwave dinner, maybe some snacks. Nothing fancy. My brain didn't have the energy for meal planning. I grabbed a basket and headed down the aisles, half in a daze. A frozen burrito, a six-pack of soda, some chips, the essentials. As I made my way to the checkout, I noticed a woman in front of me. She was older, maybe in her 70s. Her clothes were simple but clean, her hands wrinkled from years of work. In her basket, just milk and a loaf of bread. That was it. Nothing else. She reached into her purse, rifling around for her wallet. A few seconds passed. Then a few more. Her expression changed from calm to anxious. Her hands moved faster, more frantic. She checked her coat pockets. Nothing. The guy behind me let out an annoyed sigh. "Come on, lady, we don't have all night." Another voice chimed in. Something about how people should check for their money before getting in line. The cashier looked unimpressed. "Either pay or step aside," she said flatly. The old woman swallowed hard and took a step back. "I must have left it at home," she mumbled, barely loud enough to hear. She turned, about to walk away without her groceries. Before I even thought about it, I stepped forward and swiped my card. The beep of the register was the only sound for a second. She turned to me, her eyes wide. "You don't have to do that." I just shrugged. "It's bread and milk. No big deal." She placed a hand over her heart like I had just handed her a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. We all have bad days. She grabbed her bag and gave me one last grateful smile before heading toward the door. The guy behind me scoffed like I had just committed some crime against efficiency. I paid for my own stuff and walked out into the cool night air. The city hummed around me, cars rolling by, neon signs flickering, the distant sound of sirens somewhere in the background. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't expect some cosmic reward for helping a stranger. But as I walked to my car, something inside me felt different, like I had taken a step, however small, toward being the kind of person I wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first real sign of something bigger waiting for me. I had just unlocked my car and was about to get in when I heard footsteps behind me, quick and deliberate. Before I could turn around, a voice called out, "Hey, excuse me." A small group of people approached. Two guys, one holding a camera, another with a mic, and a woman from the store right in the middle of them. She looked different now, standing taller, her face no longer anxious but warm with gratitude. The guy with the mic smiled like he had just won the lottery. "Dude, you're not going to believe this." I blinked. Believe what? This was a social experiment. For show. We were filming the whole time. He gestured to the camera guy, who was still recording. "And man, you totally passed." I frowned. "Passed?" The woman nodded, clutching her grocery bag to her chest. "They asked me to pretend I lost my money and see if anyone would help." I glanced at the camera again, feeling my stomach twist. So I had just been part of some reality TV stunt? The mic guy kept going. "We do this all the time, testing if people will step up when someone's in need. And you? You didn't even hesitate." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't done it for attention. I wasn't trying to prove anything. But now, there was a camera in my face, and a small crowd had started gathering around us. "Mind if we ask you a few questions?" he continued. "Just a quick interview for the show." I scratched the back of my neck. "I don't really. It won't take long, I promise. Just what made you help her?" I exhaled, glancing at the woman, then back at him, because it was the right thing to do. He grinned, and I shrugged. I don't know, man. It's not that complicated. If you see someone struggling, you help. If roles were reversed, I'd hope someone would do the same for me. The guy gave an exaggerated nod, clearly eating this up. So you believe in the whole treat others how you want to be treated thing? I let out a small laugh. Yeah, pretty much. He turned to the camera. You hear that, folks? This guy gets it. The camera guy gave me a thumbs up, and I wasn't sure what to do. So I just nodded. The mic guy pulled out his phone. Mind giving us your number? We might want to follow up later. And where do you work? Just for our notes. I hesitated. This was getting weird. But before I could overthink it, I rattled off my number and told them about the auto shop. They jotted it down, thanked me again, and finally, the camera light clicked off. The woman smiled. Thank you again. I gave a small wave. Take care. With that, they were gone, and I was left standing in the parking lot, trying to process what had just happened. My 15 seconds of fame, I guessed. By the time I got home, I had mostly pushed it to the back of my mind. I heated up my dinner, kicked back on the couch, and flipped through channels. Nothing about my life had changed. At least, not yet. A week passed since that weird grocery store encounter, and life had gone back to normal. Or at least, that's what I thought. One morning, I walked into the shop, same as always, ready to spend another day elbow deep in grease and engine parts. But the moment I stepped inside, a few of the guys turned toward me, grinning like they knew something I didn't. Dude, one of them said, wiping his hands on a rag, you didn't tell us you were famous. I frowned. What? Another guy chuckled. We saw you on TV last night, man. That social experiment thing? Kindness will save the world, or whatever it's called. It took me a second to register what he was saying. I had completely forgotten about that whole setup. I figured it was just some online thing, not a full-blown TV segment. One of the younger mechanics pulled out his phone, replaying the clip. Sure enough, there I was, standing in that grocery store, paying for that old lady's milk and bread, like some kind of everyday hero. I shook my head and laughed. Well, guess that makes me the most famous mechanic in town. The guys cracked up, and just like that, the moment passed. The rest of the day went on like normal. Oil changes, tire rotations, busted radiators. Fame or not, cars still needed fixing. A week later, it happened again. But this time, it wasn't just some guy in the shop cracking a joke. I was in the middle of replacing a brake rotor when the shop's lead mechanic, Frank, came over, smirking. Hey, you might want to come outside. I wiped my hands on my coveralls. Why? Frank tilted his head toward the front of the shop. Because there's a real nice SUV out there, and some important-looking dudes are asking for you. I didn't know what you did, but they got that government agent. Look, so if you robbed a bank, now's the time to confess. A few of the guys nearby turned to listen, looking just as curious as I felt. I raised an eyebrow. You're messing with me. Frank crossed his arms. Swear on my last beer, I'm not. I wasn't sure what to expect as I walked outside, but I definitely wasn't expecting this. A black Jeep sat idling in the parking lot. Sleek, spotless, the kind of ride that only people with serious money drove. Even as a mechanic, I'd never seen one this pristine. Standing next to it were two men in dark suits, sunglasses on despite the fact that it wasn't even that bright outside. They looked like they had just walked off a movie set. One of them stepped forward, looking me up and down like he was confirming something. Then he pulled out his phone, checked something, and nodded. You're Jake Carter? I hesitated before answering. Yeah, who's asking? The man slid his phone back into his pocket. There's someone who'd like to meet you. I frowned. Who? He didn't answer, just opened the Jeep's back door and gestured for me to get in. I glanced over my shoulder. The guys from the shop were standing near the garage doors, watching the whole thing with their mouths practically hanging open. I wasn't the only one confused here. I turned back to the man. Where exactly are we going? You'll find out soon enough. Every instinct told me to be suspicious. But at the same time, wasn't this exactly what I had been waiting for? Something different? Something big? I exhaled, nodded, and told him to give me a second. I went inside, washed up, changed into something that wasn't covered in grease, and grabbed my things. By the time I walked back outside, the whole shop had gathered by the doors, staring like I was about to board a spaceship. I climbed into the Jeep, the door shut behind me, and as we pulled out a lot, I had only one thought. This was the beginning of something new. The Jeep cruised down the highway, the world outside blurring into streaks of neon signs, streetlights, and long stretches of dark road. Inside, it was silent. The two men in suits didn't say a word, didn't glance at me, didn't do anything that would give me even a hint of what was going on. I sat there, arms crossed, tried to act like I wasn't second-guessing every decision I had made in the past 30 minutes. Was this a mistake? Probably. Was I about to get recruited into some secret agency? Less likely, but hey, anything was possible at this point. I thought about asking them again where we were going, but something told me I wasn't going to get a straight answer. So I just sat back, watched the landscape shift, and waited. Then I saw it. The Jeep slowed as we approached the gated entrance. Beyond the heavy iron fence was a private airstrip, the kind of thing you only saw in movies. And parked right in the middle of it, blade still slowly spinning, was a sleek black helicopter. I let out a slow breath. Okay, this was officially the most surreal moment of my life. The guy in the passenger seat turned to me. We need to take a quick trip to New York. I blinked. New York? He nodded. We'll bring you back when it's over. That was vague. Way too vague. But at this point, I was already in too deep. If they had wanted to do something to me, they would have done it by now. I stepped out of the Jeep and onto the tarmac. The wind from the helicopter's blades whipped against my face as I followed the man toward it. The second suit stayed behind, standing by the car, watching as I climbed inside. The door shut. A second later, we were in the air. The flight was smooth, but my mind was spinning. Why me? Why was I sitting in a private helicopter, heading to a place I had never even visited before? The guy sitting next to me didn't seem interested in conversation. He spent most of the ride checking his phone, occasionally looking up like he was verifying something. The city lights of New York appeared on the horizon, glowing against the night sky. Minutes later, we were descending onto another private landing pad, this one perched on top of a glass skyscraper. As soon as we touched down, another luxury car was already waiting. Sleek, black, expensive. The kind of car that costs more than some people's houses. The door opened for me, like I was some kind of VIP. I slid inside, and the moment I was buckled up, we were moving. I tried to get my bearings, but New York was nothing like the small town I had grown up in. Skyscrapers loomed above, traffic wove in chaotic patterns, and every street seemed alive with energy. For the first 10 minutes, I thought about asking questions, but the driver was silent, and I had a feeling he wasn't the one calling the shots. After nearly an hour of weaving through the city, we turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway, and then I saw it. The house, if you could even call it that, was massive, more of a mansion. No, a compound. It stretched out over acres, with high walls, tall windows, and perfectly trimmed hedges. The kind of place you only see in magazines, the kind of place that screams money. I leaned back in my seat, trying to process what I was looking at. Who lived here? And more importantly, why did they want to see me? One thing was for sure, whatever was about to happen, it was going to be interesting. The doors to the mansion swung open, and a well-dressed butler motioned for me to follow. The place was even more impressive inside. High ceilings, marble floors, artwork that probably cost more than my entire lifetime of paychecks. It was a kind of house that didn't just scream wealth. It whispered it in a way that made you feel small. We moved through a long hallway until we reached a set of large wooden doors. The butler pushed them open, revealing an office straight out of a billionaire's dream. A massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a view overlooking the city skyline. Behind the desk sat a man who looked to be in his 50s, sharp suit, the kind of presence that instantly told you he was in charge. Next to him, standing near the window, was a woman, elegant, effortlessly beautiful, maybe in her early 40s. But the second she turned to look at me, I felt my stomach drop. Her eyes, bright blue, the same shade as mine. Before I could even process that thought, she gasped and rushed toward me, wrapping her arms around me like I was someone she had waited her whole life to see. "You're here," she whispered. I stood there, stiff, confused, my brain trying to catch up with what was happening. This wasn't just a warm welcome. This was personal. Too personal. The man behind the desk cleared his throat. "Sophia, you're scaring the poor kid. He's going to bolt before he hears anything." She loosened her grip, but didn't let go completely. "I won't," she said. "Not now. Not ever." I swallowed hard, finally managing to pull back just enough to get a good look at her. She was studying my face like she was trying to memorize every detail. The man gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Jake. We have a lot to talk about." I hesitated, then slowly lowered myself into the chair. The woman, Sophia, sat beside me, her hands clasped tightly together like she was holding herself back from grabbing me again. "My wife owns this estate," the man said, leaning back in his chair. "She runs multiple businesses, charities, investments. But none of that is why you're here." I didn't say anything. I couldn't, because none of this made sense. Then she did something that knocked the air right out of my lungs. Sophia reached up and gently pulled back the collar of her blouse, revealing the base of her neck. My breath caught in my throat. There, in the exact same spot as mine, was a birthmark. The same shape, the same size, the same mark I had spent my entire life getting teased for. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "You're my mom." Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your mother." The room felt like it was tilting. My whole life, I had lived with this feeling that I didn't belong, that something was missing. And now, in the span of a few seconds, I had my answer. I wasn't just different. I had been lost. I forced myself to breathe, to find my voice. "Then why did you leave me? Why did I end up in a shelter? Did you not want me?" Sophia flinched, shaking her head quickly. "No, Jake, never. You have to understand, I didn't leave you. I never wanted to. But I was young and I didn't have a choice." She wiped at her tears and took a deep breath before starting from the beginning. She had grown up in wealth, in a world where family name and status meant everything. Her parents had strict rules, unspoken laws about who she could associate with, what she could do, who she could love. But at 19, she fell for the last person they would have approved of, a young landscaper who worked on their estate. They met in secret, stolen moments between garden paths and moonlit terraces. And then one day, she found out she was pregnant. When she told him, he panicked, made promises he didn't keep. And before she knew it, he was gone. She was left alone, terrified, with nowhere to turn except to her family. And when she told them, the reaction was worse than she had imagined. Shame, anger, disbelief. Their only daughter, pregnant by nobody? Unacceptable. So they hid her away. They sent her to a private home in another state, surrounded by people paid to keep secrets. When the time came, she gave birth, exhausted and weak from the ordeal. And when she woke up, her baby, was gone. The doctors told her I hadn't survived, that the birth had been complicated, that there had been nothing they could do. But she never believed them. Something deep inside her told her they had lied. But no matter how much she begged, she never got answers. Years passed. She built a life for herself, fell in love again, got married, had a son. And then, just before her father passed, he confessed the truth. I hadn't died. I had been taken, given away, placed in a shelter under the guise of an anonymous adoption. Her father had made sure there were no records, no way for her to find me. The only person who had known the full truth was a doctor who handled everything, and he had passed away years ago. I sat there, stunned, my mind barely keeping up with what I was hearing. It didn't feel real. This was the kind of story you saw in movies, the kind that made you roll your eyes because life didn't work that way. But here I was. I swallowed hard and asked the one question still spinning in my mind. "How did you find me?" She gave a small, tearful laugh. "It wasn't me. It was my son, your brother. Apparently, he loved watching reality shows and social experiments. A few nights ago, he had been watching TV when he spotted someone familiar, asterisk me star. And when he saw the birthmark on my neck, the same one he had, the same one she had, he ran straight to her and said, "Mom, I think I just saw my brother on TV." She had called her husband, told him everything. He had reached out to the TV network, used his contacts to track down where I worked. And the biggest shock? The company that owned the chain of auto shops I worked at, it belonged to them. My jaw dropped. "You're telling me I've been working for you this whole time?" Her husband chuckled. "Technically, yes." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A simple act, paying for a stranger's groceries, had led me to the truth I had been missing my entire life. If that wasn't a miracle, I didn't know what was. Sophia reached for my hand, her voice soft. "Jake, can you forgive me?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "There's nothing to forgive. You didn't give me up. They took me from you." She let out a small sob, gripping my hand tighter. For the first time in my life, I knew where I came from, and I wasn't lost anymore. They insisted I stay. There was no debate, no hesitation, just a firm, unwavering decision from my mother, her husband, and even my new brother. Before I could even wrap my head around what was happening, my belongings in my old apartment were already packed and delivered. Turns out, when you have the kind of money they did, things move fast. The first few days felt unreal. I walked around in a daze, half expecting to wake up back in my tiny, run-down apartment. At night, I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, convinced that this was all just a dream, that I'd be back to scraping by at the auto shop, invisible to the world. But every morning, I'd open my eyes and find myself in a bedroom bigger than my entire old place, staring at ceilings so high they looked like they belonged in a museum. My brother, Ethan, made things easier. From day one, he treated me like I had always been part of his life. No awkwardness, no hesitation, just an endless flood of stories, questions, and invitations to do stuff. He took it upon himself to give me a crash course on the family's businesses, the people I needed to know, even which restaurants were actually worth their overpriced menus. He was a good kid, the kind of brother I never thought I'd have. My mother's husband, Robert, was just as welcoming. I expected some level of tension, some kind of territorial thing, but it never came. He wasn't trying to replace my past. He was just there, supportive, steady, treating me like I belonged. Then there was my mother. She was always nearby, not overbearing, not smothering, but always within reach. It was like she was afraid that if she let me out of her sight for too long, I'd disappear again. It was strange, going from feeling like a burden my whole life to suddenly being treated like someone who mattered. The contrast was almost too much to handle. But little by little, I adjusted. Weeks passed. I settled into this new reality. Luxury was a weird thing to get used to. Having a driver, a private chef, a literal team of people handling every possible inconvenience. But the truth was, I liked driving myself. Something about being behind the wheel, feeling in control. It was grounding. And with a garage filled with cars that most people could only dream of owning, I wasn't exactly complaining. One afternoon, my mother finally asked a question I had been avoiding since the day I arrived. "How is it? The life you had before?" She had tried before, gently testing the waters, but I had always brushed it off. I didn't want to think about it, about them, about the people who had called themselves my family and treated me like I was nothing. But that day, for some reason, I told her everything. I told her about the years of being treated like an outsider, like I was a nuisance rather than a son, about the constant reminders that I owed them, that I had earned my place under their roof. I told her about the favoritism, how my sister got everything while I got scraps. How, on the night of her 16th birthday, they had bought her a brand new car, while I worked late just to help pay the bills. How they had thrown a party, without even telling me. How, when I confronted them, they told me the truth, not with remorse, not with kindness, but like it was something I deserved to hear. I told her about how my father had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't his son, that I was nothing more than a responsibility they had regretted taking on. How they had given me a choice, keep paying my way or leave. So I left, By the time I finished talking, my mother's face was streaked with tears. She hadn't interrupted, hadn't spoken, just listened. I reached across the table and wiped her tears away. Don't cry, Mom. I have a real family now. That's all that matters. She took a shaky breath, squeezing my hand. You always had a family. We just had to find you. For the first time in my life, I truly believe that. Life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. A few years ago, I was just a guy working late shifts in an auto shop, barely scraping by. Now, I was studying at one of the most prestigious business schools in the country, surrounded by future CEOs, investors, and industry leaders. It still felt surreal at times. I had access to opportunities one never thought possible, a family that actually cared, and a future that wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving. One afternoon, while I was in my dorm, finishing up an assignment, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. It was him, my former father. His tone was casual at first, almost friendly. He said he had seen a television special about me, the story of the lost son reunited with his wealthy family. He acted like he was happy for me, but I could hear the calculation in his voice. Then came the real reason for his call. You're rich now, he said. Maybe you won't forget the people who raised you. I gripped my phone tighter. Those people, the ones who made it clear every day that I was nothing to them, the ones who kicked me out the moment I stopped being useful, now they wanted to pretend we were family. I took a deep breath and told him the truth. You were never my family. His tone changed instantly. The fake warmth disappeared. He got angry, started ranting about how they had fed me, clothed me, given me a roof over my head, and now I owed them. When I didn't react, he threatened to take me to court, to sue me for every dime I had, to demand repayment for all the years they supported me. I almost laughed. Do whatever you want, I said, but don't ever call me again. He must have realized he had no leverage, because that was the last time I ever heard from him. And no, they never sued. Probably because every lawyer they approached took one look at my new family's legal team and backed out immediately. Turns out, it's hard to win a lawsuit when the people you're going up against own their own law firm. Years passed. I finished business school, traveled the world, and fully embraced the life I had been given. I had access to things I never dreamed of. Private events, high-stakes meetings, vacations to places I couldn't even pronounce. But no matter how much my life changed, I never forgot where I came from. I never forgot what it was like to have nothing, which is why, when my mother surprised me with a graduation gift, I was speechless. She handed me the paperwork and smiled. It's yours now. I scanned the documents, my heart pounding. It was the ownership transfer for the very same chain of auto shops where I had once worked as a mechanic. I looked up at her, stunned. You're serious? She nodded. You worked hard for them before. Now they work for you. I didn't even know what to say. A few years ago, I was fixing cars there, struggling to pay rent. Now, I own the entire company. One evening, I sat on the terrace of my house overlooking the ocean, a drink in hand. The air was warm, the waves steady, the stars endless. Next to me, my girlfriend rested her head on my shoulder, content, peaceful. I thought back to that night at the grocery store, the moment that had set everything in motion. One small act of kindness had changed the course of my life in ways I never could have predicted. If there was one thing I had learned, it was this: you never know what life has planned for you. One simple choice, one good deed, can set off a chain of events that leads you somewhere you never imagined. So if you ever wonder whether kindness matters, take it from me. It does.